Good evening and welcome to The Nation Talks. Thanks for joining us this evening. We have yet another great guest, someone who has thought very long and seriously about the currency in a newly independent Scotland. Tonight, The Nation talks to Dr Tim Rideout, the first Maxman to feature on TNT, another first. How are you doing, Tim?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to talking to you for the next hour.
How are you coping with COVID?
Okay, I've mostly been at home, but only been out of S-Bank, Dalkeith, about twice or three times since March.
Yeah. And you always wear your mask, right?
In the shops or something, yes.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. Tell us a little bit about your background, Tim. Now, you were born, as I said, in the Isle of Man, but then you spent some time in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. I grew up on a farm and halfway between Douglas and Castletown. After my father had an accident, he got trampled on by some of the cattle that we had. And so he was advised to give up farming because it would be, maybe lead to rheumatism and arthritis and things if he was out in the all weathers. My mother had an uncle in Cape Town. We'd been there once on holiday, and it seemed like a place that would be sensible to go. This was end of 1974. I had another year at prep school in Cheshire, and then I went in 1975.
And how did you find the connection between your school that you were at before and schooling in South Africa? Was there a lot of commonality, or was it very, very different?
I really liked the school in Cheshire. It was a rather unusual place called Mostyn House. It was the headmaster's great-grandfather, I think, had founded it, so it was very much a family business. It was a boys' boarding school, and they didn't believe, for example, in homework. So the 5 years I was there, we never had homework. The headmaster said it was a waste of time. And what we had in the evenings was what he called occupations. Occupations were things like chess, bridge, metalwork, woodwork, model railways, photography, astronomy, and things like that. So the school had, they had a photographic darkroom. If you did photography, you went and mixed your chemicals, exposed your photographic paper, developed it, all that sort of thing. You didn't realize you were actually doing chemistry.
Oh, fantastic. What a great approach. And how was South Africa compared to that?
The high school in South Africa, a place called Bishops, styles itself as the Eton of South Africa. And to me, it was like Tom Brown's school days. We still had fagging, which meant you had to sort of go running off to the tuck shop for a prefect or polish his shoes or something like that. Very much into, you should get 2 hours homework sat in a classroom every evening. I usually put my books on the table so nobody could see and then went to sleep.
And yet, despite all of that, you're bristling with degrees. How many degrees do you have?
Well, I've got a BA and then an honours, which in South Africa count as separate. Got a master's degree and a PhD.
In what subjects?
I did a double major for the BA, which was geography and economics, with economic history as well, and a few outside subjects like maths, statistics, and computer science. And then after that, I've concentrated on economic geography.
Terrific, super. Well, you're well positioned to talk about our main subject later on, perhaps. So tell us about your career. What have you been doing up until where you are now?
Well, I really always fancied being an academic. That was sort of really why I sort of wanted to do things like the PhD, because sort of really necessary for any advancement in the sort of university world. I used to spend my sort of student days collecting rock samples and slides of urban environments and whatever, which were all going to be used for my teaching in the future. But in the early 1990s, when I might have found a post in a university, and I was a research assistant in Edinburgh for some years, but they were just temporary contracts and there was no really permanent lectureships available. This was the time of the Thatcher and Major cuts.
Oh, yeah.
And I was offered a job at Bartholomew's, the Edinburgh map maker.
Oh, yeah.
It really arose because I'd done all the maps for my master's degree and my PhD digitally on the early sort of automated mapping systems. I taught myself to use those.
And how's that working out? How's map making working out for you? Because you produced a map of Scotland, didn't you?
Well, we've done lots of maps. We've got, I think, was about 600 or 700 listed on Amazon at the moment, or on our own xyzmaps.com website. But the The ones people in Scotland have seen were the ones which featured in the National, which we did a series of 3 maps. There's a European Union map, a world map, and a British Isles map. And they all show Scotland as a completely independent, separate country with an international border. Edinburgh is the capital. And we've labelled it, the other bit is the United Kingdom of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The Europe map was the most popular. It's the European Union, so we have England out, Scotland still in. We also show Catalonia as an independent country.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So let's move on to the subject that is probably central to our discussion tonight. What's your view about the currency in an independent Scotland?
Well, it's really very simple, and it's probably about the only thing that I agree with Professor Ronald MacDonald, who's the Adam Smith Professor of Macroeconomics at Glasgow University. He tends to feature extensively in Tory party press releases, which is why I would probably not agree with him about much. But he did say that if Scotland was to be independent, the only sensible choice is to have its own currency, and the worst possible choice would be sterlingisation. And he's right. I agree with him on that. It's exactly the same position as I have, that if you're going to be an independent country, you have to have your own currency, and there really isn't a choice about it.
Okay, let's just take us through that, because sterlingisation has been recommended as an approach, I think, by the Growth Commission, and we talked about this last week with Andrew Wilson. Why do you think that sterlingisation would be a mistake?
Well, on the surface, it looks like a sensible option by which nothing changes. The pensioner still has the same banknotes as they do today. Your bank account stays the same, and it looks like nothing's changed. And for the man in the street, it hasn't. But the problem is that behind the scenes, your house looks exactly the same. The bathroom still works, but all that's happened is that the plumbing's been disconnected, and you don't realise that until it's too late. So, as soon as you're outside the sterling zone, then we have no control over sterling. We have no say in how it's run. Things like our interest rate is going to be set in London, and they're not going to be interested in whether we like what they set or not. The exchange rate is going to be decided in London. We don't have any lender of last resort.
Good
go
evening,
on,
and
where's your
welcome
lender of last
to the
resort?
Nation
Well, in
Talks.
sterlingisation, there is no.
Thanks for joining us this evening.
Resort.
We have yet another
if you take,
great
say, the
guest,
Clydesdale Bank, it's a fairly
someone
small
who's
bank.
thought very
I think it
long
has
and
assets or
seriously
liabilities of
about
about
the
35
currency
billion
in a
pounds.
newly
So that's quite
independent
small.
Scotland.
The Royal
Tonight,
Bank of Scotland was
the
over
Nation
$1 trillion.
talks to Dr Tim
But if the
Rideout,
Clydesdale
the
Bank went
first
bust,
Manxman
and the
to
Scottish
feature on
government was asked to
TNT,
pay us the
another
80,000
first.
euros,
How are you doing, Tim?
£80,000, the 100,000 euros.
Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to
they have
talking to you for the
supposedly
next
on
hour.
everyone's bank account.
How are you coping with
Where
COVID?
would the Scottish government get the 35
Okay, I've mostly been
billion
at home, but only been out of
themselves. They can't get it from Keith. So effectively, whatever the guarantee
three
you
times
think you
since
have on the
March.
bank account,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist in
And you always
reality
wear your
because there's
mask,
no money
right?
that could actually pay
in the
it out
shops
if it
or
was
something,
asked
yes.
to do so.
That's what we like to
And
hear. That's what we
Again,
like to hear.
the Scottish
Tell us a little
government,
bit about your background,
it can't
Tim. Now,
finance
you were born, as I
its
said, in
deficit.
the
It
Isle
will
of
have a
Man.
deficit.
But then you spent some
the
time
only
in
place they're going to be able
South
to
Africa.
get that from is to go off to London.
Yeah, that's right.
Try and sort of.
I grew up on a farm
in
and
the international
halfway
market
between Douglas and
to get
Castletown.
the sterling. After my father had an accident, he got trampled on by some of the cattle that we had. In Scotland, we have a lot of foreign-owned companies, which he was advised to give up farming because that would be the whiskey industry lead to rheumatism and arthritis and things if he was out of Scotland. So my mother had an uncle in Cape Town, quite a large flow of once on holiday. That is going
it
out
seemed
all
like,
the time as those profits are a place that would be sensible to go. This was because we're part of the UK 1974. But that stops. So I had another year at prep school in
How do you finance
Cheshire,
that outflow?
and then I have to suppress domestic demand, which means.
And how did you find the
taxing
connection
us
between
and stopping us
your
spending
school
money so
that
that
you
you
were at
can free
before
up more
and
goods to
schooling in
export,
South Africa?
so that you can increase
Was
the
there a lot of
export revenues
commonality,
and
or was
reduce
it
the
very, very
imports.
different?
And
I really like the school in Cheshire. It was a rather unusual place
it's
called
just
Moston
it's
House.
not a sensible way. It's full of the headmasters. I think the Scottish
grandfather, I think, had founded it, so it founded it.
So it was very much a family business.
So in short, you
it was a
think
boys'
that
boarding school.
sterlingisation would be a
And,
disaster?
They didn't believe, for
Well,
example,
it
in
wouldn't
homework.
necessarily
So
be a
the 5 years I
disaster
was there,
immediately.
We never
but
had homework.
it can turn into a
Headmaster
disaster
said it was a
at
waste
any
of time.
moment.
And any time it does, there's nothing
what we had in the
evenings was what he called occupations. Just sort of occupations were things like chess. The Scottish government is entirely defenceless. Woodwork.
What would you say to the criticism that
astronomy,
this
and
is all
things
very
like that.
well
So
and
the
good,
school
but
had
it'd be
they had a
very
photographic
difficult to
darkroom if you
explain
did photography. You went to mixture chemicals, exposed
electorate during the referendum,
photographic paper, developed
and the opposition
all that sort of thing. You didn't realise you were actually doing
with
chemistry.
the fact that this is an untried arrangement. What a great approach!
Well, it's not an untried arrangement. Every country, the high school in South Africa has introduced its own currency. I think styles itself as the Eton of South Africa. When you think of, to me, it was like Tom Brown's school days. We still had fagging. Can quite clearly remember when the Soviet Union collapsed, running off to the tuck shop for a prefect to polish his shoes, or places like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, very much into Azerbaijan, Estonia, 2 hours homework sat in a classroom over Ukraine. I usually put my books on the table, so nobody could see their currency. I don't think any of them had any particular
despite all of that, you're bristling with degrees.
If you remember how
many degrees do you have?
Czechoslovak. Well, I've got it's split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia counters separate. They agreed that they would have a currency union. So you'd say, well, that's like we were going to do after 2014. So we were going to have a currency union. I did a double major with 5 weeks before it collapsed. BA, which was geography and economics, with economic history. Slovaks were then faced with having done subjects like maths, statistics, and computer science any preparation for it. After that, but they still managed in about 2 months.
2 months. Terrific. Well, you're well positioned. We've had some questions coming in. Here we go. Billy Holland on Facebook. So tell us about your career. Wasn't Mark Carney right doing up until when he stated that the Bank of England were preparing?
Well, I really always fancied being an academic. That was sort of
between 10 and 20
really why
years
I sort of wanted to do things like PhD, because
personally I'm not really greatly in favour of a full digital currency. I think it's quite a good idea to keep cash.
I used to spend my sort of
not
that widely used in the UK. That slides is not necessarily environment to everywhere else used for my teaching in the future. But in the early 1990s, when I might have found 70% of all transactions, I was a research assistant in Germany for some years. My father-in-law was, but they were just temporary contracts. There was no really permanent makerships available. Use a card. This was the time for Eddie Thatcher and Major when he bought us a set of bedroom furniture. I was offered a job at Bartholomew's, €3,000 in cash in his wallet. Really arose because I'd done all the maps for my out-of-town degree and my furniture shop, a bit like digitally on the IKEA. They didn't actually accept credit cards. I taught myself to. We had that a few years ago, trying to buy a microwave for my mother-in-law when she was still with us, so that she could heat up Meals on Wheels. And we went to this big place like. Well, we've done lots of apps in Germany, and I think I tried to pay with a Visa card. And 600 or 700 listed on Amazon at the moment, or on our own xyzmaps.com website. They would take what they call in Euro in Scotland, which is the sort of the ones which featured in the National, which we did a series of 3 maps. There's a European Union map, a world map, and a British Isles map.
You raise an interesting point there.
Scotland as a completely independent separate country with an international border, Edinburgh as the capital.
I suspect people are using less and less cash.
The other bit is the United Kingdom of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The Europe map was the most popular. It's the European Union, so we have England out, Scotland still in. We also showed Catalonia as an independent country.
People will be asked to use cards rather than absolutely cash. Because
although I think the WHO's latest view is that it's very unlikely you're going to catch the virus from a bank.
Probably
I think the reason for keeping some cash goes beyond that. My mother, for example, is still living in Cape Town, and at the moment they're getting, because of failure to invest in the electricity system, very simple, and it's they're getting rotational power cuts under 8 hours every day. Professor Ronald McDonald, none of the digital payment systems work. Professor of macroeconomics at Glasgow University.
If you don't have electricity, you don't have any internet, I assume.
The other thing with all your electronic transactions that he did say that the Bank of Scotland, every single thing that you've ever, the only sensible choice is to have it right there in the tax authorities. The worst possible choice would be anyone else. And he's right. If you've been to a dodgy massage parlour or something, then know all about it. But if you're going to be an independent country, you have to have your own currency.
Actually, joking apart. Okay, let's just take us through that. I have a standardization card has been recommended. One of the striking things about that is that as soon as you make a transaction, almost as soon as you make a transaction, why it appears on your phone. Think so. What a standardization would be that applies to every.
But on the surface, it looks like a sensible.
That the card issuer has that information.
Nothing changes. The pensioner still has the same bank notes as they do today.
They've just chosen not to share
bank account stays the same.
For some reason, I thought there was some edge
like nothing's changed.
With the customer.
For the man in the street, the other thing with the cards is the bank is taking between 0.3. Behind the scenes, your house looks exactly the same. The bathroom still on cash; they don't get anything. So all that's happened is plumbing's been disconnected, and you don't realise that until it's too late.
More questions. Oh, sorry,
as soon as you're outside the sterling zone,
how long will it take to set up our own currency?
We have no control over sterling. We have no
say in my timetable, which you can find
things like our interest rate Reserve Bank in London
website
on the
interested
in whether timetable what page set or not.
I'm predicting we have about 2 years of transition period.
We don't have any
lender of last resort in between the referendum and the actual resort.
Well, in sterlingization,
there is no lender.
I've got the referendum next September, and then I'll be picking,
say, the
Clydesdale Day 2023 as Independence Day.
I think it has assets or liabilities of about 2 years, 2 months, £billion. And that's in that time you're busy getting the central bank's legislation through Holyrood.
But if the Clydesdale Bank, the central bank, and the Scottish government was asked to pay us the 80,000
or belong to the taxpayers and £100,000,
guaranteeing
the notes,
that
I think
they have
national competition to
design
everyone's
bank
account.
Getting
where
the
would the Scottish
government
get the £35 billion from?
Being ready to introduce
them
themselves,
they can't
2 months after
independence.
So effectively, whatever the guarantee you think you have on that bank account, it doesn't exist in reality because there's no money that could actually pay it out if it was asked to do so.
Mandy Garland is asking this question on
the
Facebook.
Scottish government,
could Tim please explain the differences between
we'll have a deficit,
the currency zone
and the only place they're going to be able to get that from is to go off to London,
which would be better for an independent Scotland? I think you've actually answered the last question,
to get the sterling.
Should we like to know the difference between the currency zone
which is that
and
in Scotland we have a lot of foreign-owned companies.
Well, if we use sterling, we'd effectively be part of a
sterling currency
whiskey industry, so on. It's all
in the 1960s, for example,
profits are taken out was really quite large. So there's a big flow, quite a large flow of sterling
former
that is going out all the time as British profits are repatriated.
But now the
marginally
left
replaced because we're part of the UK system.
Our own way on
but that's currency. So the currency union is different because that outflow you're going to have to suppress domestic demand which means the UK government and the Scottish government that us stopping us spending money so that you can free up more goods to export.
We'd have to have
directors increase the export revenues and reduce the imports.
The finance minister in Scotland would discuss with the UK Chancellor about what's going to happen on interest rates.
It's just not a sensible way to go. It's full of risks. I think the Scottish government will probably be in some sort of permanent fiscal crisis.
Remaining UK government. So in short, you think that sterlingization would be
in
a
2014 it might well have happened.
Well,
it wouldn't necessarily be a disaster immediately, but
the UK
it can turn into a disaster at any moment.
Please,
any time it does, there's nothing you can do about it.
They weren't going to do that before the vote.
Just sort of, but they might have afterwards, simply because they probably
the Scottish government is
entirely defenseless
sterling zone to prop up sterling.
What do you say to the criticism of Scotland to be the currency zone? This is all very well and good, but it would be very difficult to explain the currency of Scotland, a sceptical electorate.
Well, I think what will probably happen is that
the opposition
the Scottish pound, or whatever you want to call it,
with the fact that this is an untried
the old silver coin of Scotland. Well, it's not an untried arrangement as the German mark. Every country that I think will tend to rise introduced sterling currency. I think the problem for us will be a little bit like Switzerland of trying to stop it. When you think of, it's not that long ago. The old
stopping your currency rise quite clearly.
Remember when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991,
which
and if you're selling your currency, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, increases your foreign reserves. Within a year or two, they all introduced their own currency, and I don't think any of them had any
loads of questions
about doing that.
Loads of questions, Tim.
If you remember
here's one that's
Czechoslovakia,
it's from Sean Collins. He's
Republic,
saying, does Scotland have any place that it can
the Czech Republic and Slovakia? Not as far as I would have a currency union, because you have to have a security printer. So something like 2014, we were going to have a currency union. Yesterday, I think it was that currency union lasted 3 or 4 weeks. Main companies in the world that print banknotes. The Slovaks were then faced with I think most of their countries without doing any preparation for it. Used to be in the UK, they still managed it in about 2 months. The new UK passport is also done by a security printer. And
we've had some questions coming in. Here we go.
Right. Okay.
Billy Holland on Facebook is
when Boris gets his black passport or whatever colour it is, it's going to have a little gold lettering on the back saying printed in the European
full
Union.
Digital currency.
You couldn't make it up. You really couldn't.
Between 10 and 20 years
thinking that
he may be.
Perhaps
personally, I'm not greatly in favour of a full digital currency. I think the Bank of England used cash. I mean, they used to do all that production in the UK, but as I say, a lot of it's been, the UK is not necessarily exactly typical of everywhere else, because
she seems to be
in Germany,
what you said about
latest figures I saw from last year,
she says, keep
70% of all transactions were in cash.
I've used cash twice this year.
My father-in-law was German, and he would never use a card on principle for anything. When he bought us a set of bedroom furniture, I just then think that was €3,000 in cash, and they're not necessarily immediately apparent. It was a big, for example, in the 1870s, furniture shop, a bit like the size of IKEA. They didn't actually accept all of the
planetary.
We had that a few years ago, trying to buy a microwave.
Unfortunately, my mother-in-law, when she was still with us, used in the 1870s,
so that she could heat up her meals on wheels.
We haven't had a flare
to
that
big
size
since
since, the equivalent of curries,
and we're
overdue for one. I tried to pay with a Visa card, and they wouldn't accept astronomical journals article somewhere.
And cash.
If we do get another one like
they would
that,
take a
knock out
what they call a Euro card,
which is a sort of
telephone
system
debit card
for potentially several
or
weeks.
it was cash.
Really?
So, if you've gone for entirely a digital currency, even in a war,
you raise an interesting point there.
One of these
I wonder what's happening in Germany
nuclear radiation policies, where it just affects electronic stuff.
I suspect people are using less
bring
and less
down the
cash
UK power grid with one of those over
because
the North
it's just
Sea,
not
in which case they're
practical.
all stuffed because all the money.
If we're about to go back through,
can you take us through
some form of
in fairly
lockdown or
rudimentary steps?
Again, it sort of rather suggests that
Scotland would have
people
to
will
do
be asked to use
set up
cards
its own
rather than
currency. You said
cash,
earlier it might take
because
2 years.
Yeah, although I think the WHO's
What would
latest
these 2
view is
years
that
be required
it's very unlikely going to catch the
what would need
virus
to be
from the
done in
bank.
those 2 years?
I think the reason for keeping
in the
some
first
cash
instance,
goes
we
beyond
need
that. My mother, for example, goes through the Scottish living in Cape Town, and I've called the Scottish Reserve Bank establishment because of failure to invest in the electricity system. They're getting rotational for the bank up to 8 hours every day. It's going to have a president and director.
None of the digital payment systems work during those
that it will be responsible for introducing the currency.
If you don't have electricity, you've got
like
any internet,
banking licenses and stuff like that.
The other thing with all your electronic transactions that they're all tracked.
I have a resolution
every single thing that you've ever
to the next SMP conference, which basically puts these principles in it.
Authorities or the police.
I do allow
anyone else,
the bank to if you've been to any bank in Scotland to issue its own something, they know all about it. So the Clydesdale Royal Bank of Scotland could carry on doing their own notes.
Actually,
but I would also let
apart,
things like Santander.
My son recommended that I have a
all that's in the
card.
in the principles of the bill.
The most important thing about that
is that the bank
as soon as you make a transaction, almost as soon as you make a transaction,
important part
it appears on your
should
phone.
Be answerable to Parliament.
So
and under democratic control.
That applies.
The Bank of England belongs to the Treasury.
It's not
one shareholder, which is the Treasury. The Chancellor tells the directors what to do.
Pretty much instantaneously.
In this sort of neoliberal myth, we pretend that somehow the Bank of England is independent.
For some reason,
it isn't.
I thought there's some edge in it.
And it shouldn't be, because why would you want to put
the
a
other
bunch
thing
of bankers
with the
in charge of
the
running
bank is taking between 0.3
it's scary to me.
and 2%.
I watched what they did in 2008.
Whereas on cash, they don't get anything. So
I wouldn't want any repetition of that.
It never was independent. It was nationalised in 1946 precisely to make it
Irving is asking on Facebook,
and up until Gordon Brown in 1998. It was the Chancellor
in my timetable, which you can find.
And then we had this Reserve Bank imported from websites the idea that politicians shouldn't be in charge of anything.
I'm predicting we have about 2 years of transition period before Independence Day. So in between the referendum, the bankers in charge then ran the economy into the ground. I've got the referendum next September, and then I'm picking St Andrew's Day 2023 as Independence Day.
So do you think he was right?
2 years, 2 months.
And
that's, get rid of in that time, you're busy getting the central bank legislation through Holyrood. Gold was what getting the premises of the central bank described as, which you can see in the picture behind me. Barbaric already belonged to the taxpayer, so it didn't cost anything. But unfortunately, I think Gordon Brown managed to design the banknote. Didn't sell all the gold, he sold manufactured, and he managed to sell it at the bottom of the market. Being ready to introduce the new currency approximately 2 months after.
Yet we're always told that the UK government is a centre
last weekend of January 2024. We don't actually have very much gold. I think I looked up the figures the other day. It was £18 billion worth.
Mandy Garland is asking this question on Facebook.
Worth.
Could Tim please explain the differences between the currency zone and the currency union, and which would be better?
It means that other countries will take their gold away from London and put it somewhere else.
That would be the logical. She would like to know the difference between the currency zone and I'm not a member, so you'll have to excuse me.
Well, if we use sterling, we'd effectively be part of the sterling currency zone.
In what you're describing.
In the 1960s, for example, the sterling zone was really quite large because it covered many of the
is it the Growth Commission or is it
still current British colonies? Because but the April 2019 conference rejected the Growth Commission, went their own way on currency. The policy that the SNP adopted is different because that vote of the delegates, and there had to be a green card vote between was the UK conference considers that the SNP government should take the steps necessary to enable the Scottish Parliament to authorise preparation of the Scottish currency as soon as practicable after the vote minister in Scotland would discuss with the UK Chancellor ready for introduction as soon as practicable after independence. So that is the policy. That's what the delegates voted for. And I know Andrew Wilson thinks as soon as practicable is somewhere between 10 and 15 years. It's quite possible. I don't think anywhere in 2014 it might well have happened if there'd been a yes vote.
Okay.
That
Well,
the
I wasn't aware
UK
of
would
that.
immediately come running along and
Ruth
say,
Conradi
please,
is
could we have a
asking,
currency union?
I live in Tenerife.
They weren't going to do that.
Should I be
before the
concerned
vote,
about access to my
but they
Bank of
might have
Scotland
afterwards,
account in
simply
the light
because they
of
probably
recent
need
news?
Scotland as part of the
Well,
sterling
this
zone.
is the fact that because the
Why would they need
UK is
Scotland
withdrawing from
currency
or has
or
withdrawn
currency
from the European
to
Union and is
drop
now
out?
leaving the
What would happen
single
to
market and
the currency of
the
Scotland?
customs zone? It's really that bit which is important.
Well, I think what will probably happen is that
said that the Scottish pound no longer have passporting rights. Could call it the trade, which was the old silver coin of Scotland. I don't see that it should necessarily mean that you can't access. I think it will tend to rise against internet banking, and that the problem for us will be this is a bit like Switzerland trying to stop individual banks. I think it's up to them to decide whether they wish to. Stopping your currency rights and licensing, it just means you have to create country it is and then carry on serving their customers. And if you're selling your currency, they're going to decide that say Slovakia is not worth creating that money and selling it into the foreign exchange market. There's so many increases British people in Spain that the main banks will probably
we're getting loads of questions.
Carry on
loads of questions
those customers.
Here's one that's perfectly understandable. I'm just wondering Sean Collins is saying, does Scotland have any place that it can terms of currency?
Not as far as I know,
accessing accounts,
because you have to have a security printer. So somebody like Delarue,
where you can change
I was reading yesterday, I think it was, that there are about 3 or 4 main companies in the world that print
euros,
banknotes,
vice versa. Yeah.
Delarue's one, but I think most of their production is in
it's an electronic transaction.
Used to be in the UK, but
my mother
the new UK passport is also done by a security printer, and that's managed to do it by telephone banking because we could never manage to get the internet stuff set up. And Boris gets his South Africa black passport. That was more to do with the fact that gold lettering kept insisting on sending you a PIN number by post, and a letter to South Africa takes about 2 months to arrive.
Am I right in thinking that
by which time you said it says this PIN number is valid for 10 days?
Currencies. I mean,
the Bank of England, and they refused to send it by courier. They used to do all that production in the UK, but as I said, a lot of it's been moved abroad.
Okay, Melanie McCain, what is your view on endorsing what you said about Germany in particular? She says, keep cash. Discussed briefly. I live in Sweden and I've used cash twice this year. What's your take on that? Half the place.
What I think is happening at the moment is that there's a paradigm shift happening in macroeconomics.
They may have.
This happens every sort of 30 to 40 years. I think that there's in the immediate post-war period, everyone was Keynesian, but for example, in the 1870s, there was a solar flare, which was about 1980, a very large one, and it knocked out all of the planetary telegraph systems at the time. If you had unfortunately, electricity wasn't very widely used in the 1870s. To generate extra demand of that size since apparently the unemployment were overdue for one. And then with people like Milton Friedman in the 1970s, I remember in South Africa as a student watching a TV series. If we do get another one like that, it could knock out, which was all about the telephone system, terrible mess, the state made everything we really needed to have. Freedom of choice for entirely a digital currency. Healthcare would be much better done in the free market. One of these education was much nuclear radiation policies, where they just the sort of stuff, electronic stuff. And that's you can gave rise to sort of Thatcherism, UK power grid, Reaganomics over the North Sea, minimise the state, cut tax because all the money's privatised and hand everything over to the private sector.
In fairly rudimentary,
I think
steps.
That was. Well, it's often referred to as neoliberalism
in order to set up its own currency.
You said neoclassical economics by some people.
What would these 2 years do?
I think we've seen with things like the 2007-2008 crash. Nobody.
Well, in the first instance, we need
an crash or have any explanation after I've called the Scottish Reserve Bank Establishment Bill. It's taken a decade to just sort of define the principles for the bank collapsing under it. So it's going to have a president and directors. Remember, as an economics student, it's a big sort of sexy thing responsible for introducing a currency about 1981 and things rational expectations, licenses, which was part of that whole thing. Everyone was perfectly rational. They had perfect knowledge of them. I have a resolution at the moment, which I'm splitting to the next. Before you went shopping in Morrison's, basically puts these principles in it. Was in every supermarket. I do allow the bank to license any bank in Scotland to issue its own, which was the best one. So the Clydesdale Royal Bank of Scotland could carry on. It's just not true. It's complete rubbish. And I would also let things like Santander do their own. Make a purchase because you like the colour. But all of that's in there because in the principles of the bill, the most important thing advert is that the bank should be clearly like that. We're just not rational part of the same thing goes in the stock market and under democratic stockbrokers, investors. The Bank of England belongs to the Treasury. If there's a stampede to buy shares, everyone joins in the stampede. The Chancellor tells the directors what to do.
And yet,
completely irrational
neoliberal,
as I think
we pretend that somehow the bank.
What did some central banker call it? Irrational exuberance or something.
And it shouldn't be, because why would
that's
you
what you do?
a bunch of bankers in charge
it's like a shoulder fish that. If everyone in the London financial community buys the same share at the same,
I wouldn't want any repetition of that.
Period, it never was independent. It was nationalised in 1946 precisely as everyone was doing the same thing.
Independent.
So the safety in numbers the same as
up until
Gordon Brown in 1998.
If you're the chancellor who decided what investor who goes against, then we had this, like say Warren Buffett imported from the US.
That's very dangerous, because
politicians shouldn't be in charge of anything. We need to hand it over to technocrats who run £1 or something like George Soros did, betting against them.
Of course, we've got a group of bankers
is a genius who then ran the economy into the ground. In order
if you turn out to be wrong, then you get sacked because you're out on your own.
Well,
and everyone can clearly see you made a mistake.
You think he was right?
So it's not rational.
So
what I think is happening now is that people have been looking around for new solutions. There was
gold was what
2010. There was
John Maynard Keynes described as Manchester University, where
barbarians refused to listen to any more of the economic lectures because they said they were rubbish. Unfortunately, Gordon Brown managed to sell, didn't sell all the gold, but he sold it at that stage. Managed to sell it. A lot of British universities weren't teaching anything except rational expectations.
And yet we're always told that the UK government is a centre of competence.
You had students who were graduating who didn't know. We don't actually have very much gold. I think never been exposed to Marxist £18 billion worth. They didn't know what the Great Depression in the 1930s was.
Yeah.
It was all
we still got all of Venezuela's gold as well.
All the staff, the students, whatever, they're all in the same groupthink with no real critical appreciation that other countries will take their gold away from London and put it somewhere. And what's happened is various other people that have, in a sense, gone back a little bit towards Keynesianism.
You'll have to excuse my ignorance.
But modern monetary
theory
theory
SNP stand
just sort of rebadged Keynesianism.
Is what you're describing.
It goes a bit beyond that. But it's really just looking at how money actually works.
In terms of
and the fact that
is it the Growth Commission?
People often say, "Oh, but isn't it backed with gold?" Well, no, because that stopped in the April 2019 conference rejected traditional economics was based around the sort of gold standard type. The policy that the SNP adopted, having to maintain of the delegates, there had to be a hard vote, restrict the way the currency. Conference considers that an SNP government that's all history. Steps necessary to enable the Scottish Parliament. I think we just sort of authorised the preparation of the Scottish currency. Somebody said, as soon as science proceeds one funeral at a time, with the aim that the currency be ready for introduction as soon as a new generation of economists are coming up who are saying, well, that's what the delegates voted for, doesn't work. I know Andrew Wilson thinks as soon as practicable is about between 10 and 15 years. But I don't think anyone else take account of what we think is the way that money actually works in the 21st century.
Okay. Well, I wasn't aware of that. Let me ask you this question. Ruth Conrati is asking, look, I live in Tenerife, teasing out. Should I be concerned with access to my Bank of Scotland account? Thatcher famously claimed that there was no such thing as society.
Well, this is the fact that because the UK is withdrawing from or has withdrawn from the European Union and is now leaving the single market and the customs zone, it's really that bit which is the important bit.
It was exactly like a household.
Said that UK banks no longer have passport rights and therefore it's illegal for them
how much you earned and how much you spent, and you had to balance.
I don't see that it should necessarily mean that you can't access your account here via internet. That's absolutely wrong. And this is a bit a country with a currency is nothing like a household. It's up to them to decide. Anyone ever heard of a chancellor of the Exchequer lying awake at night wondering how his country is, and then carry on serving their customers? Or whether they're going to decide that, say, whereas in a private debt, private households, I suspect that there's so many British people in Spain that
the reason that
the main banks will probably
sleep easily
get authorised to carry on.
Why can he sleep easily and yet the householder can't? I'm just wondering what sort of oversight
his own bank.
Particularly in terms of
he can simply instruct the bank to give him whatever he wishes to spend.
So he can tell cars like
American ones said that
change currencies. You can
the easiest way to get rich, wasn't to commit a burglary, it was to buy a bank,
vice versa. How does the Chancellor see that? Literally instruct. It's an electronic transaction. Perhaps just happens simply to print money.
My mother in Cape Town has I don't like the term printing money. It's not printing money by telephone banking because it's just creating internet stuff set up to work in South Africa. The government has that was more to do with the fact that the bank kept insisting on sending the PIN number by post and a letter to Chancellor can simply write a check or send a digital payment, by which time you said, well, never refuse this PIN number. Can you imagine for 10 days? The governor of the Bank of England saying, and they refused to send it by code. Excuse me,
Gracious.
Mr. Sunak, but we've got a check here that you wrote.
What
which
is
has
your
been
view
presented
on
today, and you have until 4 p.m. to pay insufficient funds, otherwise we'll have to bounce
discussed
it.
briefly with Andrew last week.
Somebody took the governor of the Reserve
what I
Bank
think
of
is
Australia
happening at the moment is that there's a paradigm shift happening in macroeconomics.
Photo sort of call type thing.
I mean, this happens every sort of 30 to 40
are there
years.
any circumstances where the
In the
Reserve Bank
immediate post-war period, everyone was a Keynesian.
And after a great deal of
The world economy between 1945 and
about
1980, most governments pursued Keynesian policies,
at any
which
moment
was
in time,
basically that if
for
you had
any
unemployment,
reason,
the solution was to
Chancellor
increase the
Exchequer
state spending
can require the Bank of
generate
England
extra demand and mop
to
up
fund pretty much
the
anything he
unemployment.
desires.
And then with people like Milton Friedman in the 1970s,
In
I
that case,
remember in
why
South
do we
Africa
need
as a
austerity?
student watching a TV series he did called Free to Choose,
policy choice,
which was all about
suited the Conservative Party
terrible
to
mess
provide
the
an
state
excuse
made
to
of
shrink
everything
the
in
state
the
and
need
try
to
and
have
get rid of the welfare state.
freedom of choice in the free market view. Healthcare would be much better done in the free
Austerity
market.
is not about having to
Education was
find
much
money.
better in the
It's
free
about
market.
social engineering.
All of this sort of stuff.
Yes.
And that's
Austerity is a policy which will
Reaganomics,
it shrinks the state,
minimise the state,
allows you to
cut
say,
tax,
we can't afford
privatise,
we can't afford to pay
hand everything over to the
unemployment
private
benefits
sector.
or
Things like that. I think to the extent that you manage to
it's
reduce
often
the
referred to as
government
neoliberalism,
or even turn it into a surplus, neoclassical economics.
The government and the private sector are just two sides of the same.
I think we've seen with things like the 2007 manages to run a surplus. It means the private sector's running a deficit. Economics predicted the crash or had any explanation. Private sector has a surplus. Happened before anyone picked it. It's taken a decade simplistic in that sort of whole theory that essentially collapsing under external internal contradiction. But for simplicity, economics student, that's a big sort of sexy thing coming in. It's a double entry accounting system. If one side's in deficit, the other side's expectations. So if the government runs a surplus, that means they push the citizens perfectly rational. They had perfect knowledge of the market.
So austerity is a policy choice.
Before you went shopping in Morrison's, you knew what the price of the citizens into debt in supermarket. The most obvious example is students graduating perfectly rationally choose which was the best one. Who owns that debt? Purchasing. It's the very wealthy, and it's just now collecting debt with interest. People are not rational. It's a policy that simply causes wealth to flow up because you like the actor you saw in the TV advert wearing that jacket or something like that. We're just
a question
not
here,
rational. And the same thing goes in stock markets. Stockbrokers, investors, whatever, they follow the
question
herd.
Is, will it make any
There's
difference
a stampede to buy shares. Everyone joins in the stampede.
Currency?
It's not rational. Probably not. Completely irrational. There is a negotiation that will have to take place with the UK about central bank would call it irrational international law. The UK already declared that's what you do, and it's like a shoulder fish that state in terms of if everyone in the London financial community buys the same share, not the same continuous state, they lose the same period. It turns out to be completely duff, which would be declared vacant. You can't be sacked because everyone's doing the same thing. So the UK has to be the safety in numbers, the same as there is for in international law. The continuing state gets the assets. If you're the brilliant investor who goes against the trend, like say Warren Buffett sort of stuff, and that's very dangerous because if you're right and you make £1 billion or something like George Soros did, betting against up over the years, it's great. Everyone said it's a genius. A negotiation is because, but unlike if you turn out to be wrong, then you get sacked because you're out on your own. In Scotland, I think a lot of it, and everyone can clearly see you made a mistake. Councils, they all have a funded pension scheme. So what I think is happening now is that people have been looking around for new solutions. There was revenues. Like 2010, there was this the National Insurance Fund, Manchester University, £15 billion. The students refused to listen to any more there because it's invested in, because they said there were rubbish. It's just transitory between when national insurance comes in and redraws paid out. But at that stage, a lot of British universities weren't teaching anything except rational expectations for independence, and Scottish government, sort of Chicago School economics agree that the state had students who were graduating who didn't know who Keynes was. The Scottish government is then heavily exposed to Marxist contributions. They would then have the Great Depression in the 1930s existing state pension. It was all group thing. I suspect we'd probably ask for some students, whatever, all in the same group thing with no real critical, maybe a few billion or something appreciation of the other thing to bear in mind is that unfortunately, and what's happened is various expectancy people in Scotland, in a sense, gone back a little bit towards industrial past and all that sort of thing. Modern monetary theory is less. Just a man needs to have has a life expectancy of about 72 years. Really just looking at how money actually works, and the fact that an average earnings in people often say, "Oh, but isn't it backed with 50%?" Well, no, it isn't. That stopped in 1971. In a lot of the traditional economics was based around the sort of gold standard type. Therefore, they get back
having to maintain 60% of what they would have paid reserves in terms of restrict the way the currency worked average earnings, which probably that's all history. It doesn't apply anymore. So I think we're just if we worked it all out, somebody said given the existing procedure, one could probably afford to increase the state pension without a new generation of economists are coming up who are saying, well, basically the previous lot doesn't
poor
work.
people are paying for rich people's
pensions. Look at this, and well, those who don't live very long, we have modified subsidising macroeconomic theory to take account of what we think that's how any pension system money actually works in the 21st century.
People. What do you make of this question? Oft-repeated, which might hopefully help by any politicians on all sides of the political spectrum. Thatcher famously, we have to balance. We have to have a balanced society. We have to balance the books. That the other guy is not going to balance the books, but I shall, leaving aside the slight obscenity of what do you make of that statement? It's a pretty stupid statement. She claimed that the government should run the economy so exactly that we maximise employment, achieve what economics calls full employment. You spent basically everyone who has a job, your budget, who wants a job, has a job. She had that wrong, didn't she? That's the job of the government. That's absolutely no. They're elected by us to work in our country with a currency is nothing like a house-paid job. Has anyone ever heard of a Chancellor of the Exchequer lying awake at night wondering how he's going to meet the debt payment on Friday and their tax choices? No. So if you're in a situation where there is major private debt, private households, it means that the government is either not spending enough mortgage payment, or that it's spending on the wrong things, or it's taxing too much. Can sleep easily. Well, for example, you could stop charging VAT on house alterations, because that obviously reduces the number of house alterations. Because he owns his own bank. If you're like the situation in the early 2000s, give him whatever he wishes, the UK economy was overheating. So he can tell the house prices going through the roof. Things like that. The easiest way to get the government to get spending too much wasn't to commit a burglary, it was to buy a bank. Gordon Brown should have been increasing the taxes on houses, house transfers, and things like that in order to dampen down the housing. To print money anytime you like. Well, I don't like the term printing money. It's not printing money of salaries. It's just creating money. It's just meant that it was pouring petrol on the fire. The government has an overdraft facility at the bank. I don't think it's really called the Ways and Means account. What I'm saying is not radical. The Chancellor can simply write a check or send a digital payment, and the chairman of the CBI will never refuse that. Can you imagine 2016 the governor of the Bank of England saying exactly what I'm saying, getting on the phone? The Monetary Policy Committee should look at the state of the economy. Mr. Sunak, and if it's not doing very well, we've got a check here that you wrote, which has been allocated 50 billion, and you have until 4 p.m. to pay insufficient funds, otherwise they tell the Chancellor we're taking 50 billion back. So you'll have to. Something took the governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia to task in a sort of journalist over 2 or 3 centuries, and are in the short term. Are there any circumstances where the Reserve Bank is going to refuse the government's going to pay? The government's after a great deal of umming and ahhing and trying to evade the question. Think they finally said there are no such circumstances. Yeah, I'm sure. So a lot of people at any moment in time watching and listening to this will be very surprised by some of the things. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, for example, can require the Bank of England sovereignty to fund pretty much anything he desires. Yes, surely that they'll be thinking that will just cause inflation. In that case, why do we need necessarily cause inflation? I think inflation is actually quite difficult. It was a policy choice that the Japanese, the Conservative Party, to provide an excuse to shrink the state and trying to get inflation going for the last 30 years. So in my view, crash in 1990. Austerity, and they failed completely. It's not about having to find money. It's about Japanese national debt up to nearly 300% of GDP. Austerity is a policy which will. What you need to get inflation off the ground is usually something like we can't afford to pay, or an external benefits, or things like that. I think we've got enough time to say that. I think to reduce the government. The UK could actually be setting up exactly the perfect conditions for an inflationary shock. The government and the private sector are just two sides of the same one point. What are we doing if the government is aiming for a no-deal Brexit? The private sector 7,000 lorries parked in Kent, all trades through Dover coming to private sector has empty shelves in the supermarket before anyone picks me up. At that time, I believe 70% of our food is imported. That ignores the winter, nothing external foreign sector. But meanwhile, there was a leak from the Treasury 2 weeks ago, I think, which basically suggested that Michael Gove is hatching if one side's in deficit, the other side's Chancellor, to demonstrate that the government runs a surplus. That means they push the citizens that Brexit is a fantastic success. So increasing the government's handouts. So, for example, one of the things that we push the citizens into monetary compensation to any company which said it lost money is graduating in England with a 50,000 Jaguar Land Rover. And who owns that debt?
But they also want to demonstrate that they now can man in the street is getting his 350 million a week back. It's a policy that simply causes wealth. They've now discovered that the Bank of England can create all this money for them and that there's no limits. So they're going to start handing it out. Now you've got a situation where, due to the coronavirus, we've lost 20% of the GDP. We can now, according to Goldman Sachs, do the same again with a hard Brexit.
Will it make any difference?
So you just shrink the economy's productive capacity by maybe 30%. Probably not, combined with the government creating. There is a negotiation that will have to take place with the UK. That's how you start hyperinflation. It's the international law. Robert Mugabe destroying the commercial agriculture system in Zimbabwe and then handing all states in terms of the bank notes to all his supporters. And
that's scary.
They want to be the continuing state because if they're not the continuing state, they lose the. I don't think they have. The people in London have any idea of the dangers that they're playing. So the UK has to be the continuing. I can remember things like the Topsters Alliance and the continuing state gets the assets, so they get the Falkland Islands. If you end up with say 15% unemployment, all because furloughs ended, and the hospitality sector's all gone bust, so they get the national debt, so forth. Then and combine that with an empty shelf in the supermarket, and no bog roll, and what's going to happen? Why there would probably be a negotiation is because unlike, for example, business partner has just bought a new BMW motorbike in Scotland. The BMW dealer says just as well you're buying it now because they always have going up 15% on the 1st of January. But the state pension is not funded, it's just paid out of current tax rate. That's because of the there is tariff on motorcycles. The National Insurance Fund.
Well, there you are, folks, if you want to buy something from abroad.
That's not there because it's invested.
You don't want to leave it for much longer.
So while you're out there buying your bog rolls, insurance comes in,
thought that you might want to buy something else that comes from overseas.
I think what will probably happen is after a vote for independence. Well, they're not, but the policy government will agree that the state pension will transfer to the Scottish government. The paper, because the Scottish government is then collecting the national insurance contributions, they would then have the money to pay. It mostly comes from the existing state pension.
Okay.
I suspect we'd probably ask for some sort of lump sum to cover transition. You can always recycle the Daily Mail or something, maybe a few billion or something like that. The other thing to bear in mind is that, unfortunately, the life expectancy of people in Scotland due to a lot of ill health and so on,
this is really interesting,
and all that sort of thing.
What do you think of a job guarantee?
A man in Easterhouse that would be a life expectancy of about a sensible way to go. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about universal basic income, and therefore, if they were on average earnings in their lifetime, they only universal basic income. I think the job guarantee is a better way. A man in the universal basic income is very expensive because everyone gets it. Therefore, Warren Buffett would be getting 160% of what they'd have paid in. And I think, in terms of, to my mind, if they'd been on average, I can't see any reason with the universal basic income why it doesn't just end up as a subsidy to employers. If we worked it all out, if I was Scottish government, I'd give my existing national insurance company, if I was going to employ somebody and I knew they were getting 5,000 a year for any additional, why would I just not just take that off the wage I'm offering?
If I understand you right.
If I offer 20,000 now, suddenly those who don't live very long in government are subsidising those who do live a long time. I can say, right, that's how you pension system. The government's giving you the other
poor people.
Yeah. You could say, well, we're going to pass legislation to prevent it, but over time it will happen because they just won't put the wages up on
all sides of the political spectrum.
Because it's paid to everyone, the universal basic income is going to be at a very low level, so it's not really going to provide a decent living for
the other guy is not going to balance
maybe a little bit better than universal credit, but not much.
What do you make of that statement?
So I think if we target the money onto those, the government should run the economy so that we maximise what the job guarantee does. Achieve job guarantee basically provides state funding to basically everyone who has a job, voluntary organisations, wants a job, has a job. Whatever, and if that's the job of the government. They're elected by us to work. Put all the iron railings back in their bank is a decent out in 1940 for the war, and that's what the government said. We're going to set up a community scheme and they train some welders and whatever to do the railings. And we'll get funding from the state to. If you're in a situation where there is major unemployment and they set to work, it means that the government is either not spending enough, picking up, or that it's spending on the wrong things, vegetation, all sorts of things that are too much. Need, for example, the market is not charging VAT on household. The big thing about the job guarantee is it would pay, say, the living wage, £10 an hour. If you're like the situation in the early 2000s, where for one reason or another, the economy was overheating and. So it's house prices are fair. You're not forced to take a job guarantee. Then that means that the government is spending too much. It would provide tax training, and what Gordon Brown should have been increasing the taxes on houses. It's much house transfers to get a job if you're in a job, the housing bubble. As soon as you're unemployed, the employer thinks, hang on a minute, there must be something wrong. why are they actually increased civil service salaries? Were they increased government spending? Were they disruptive or pouring petrol on fire instead of trying to do that?
It sounds very much
really rocket science, and what I'm saying is not radical, because I listened to a lecture by Lord Adair Turner, who
I think
chairman of the CSI. I think he set up schemes all over the place. 2016, Dublin, basically saying exactly what I'm saying, that sort of thing. To the Monetary Policy Committee should look at the state of the economy.
Again, another thing with the universal basic income that I don't like is sort of, it's a bit defeatist. It says, well, they can't really do anything about this job, so we'll just give you some money and sit at home and watch heating. Then they tell the Chancellor they're taking 50 billion back. So most people don't work because they just want money. They want to meet people in the office. They want to. A lot of people find that over through meeting 2 or 3 centuries, in the short term, gives you a status, something. Then you're basically saying the government's going to. The government's fails abdicating its responsibility for running the economy because we're just left at home. Having a nice balance sheet is more important.
I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening to this will be very surprised. Well, we're almost out of time. Thank you very much for a country with good monetary sovereignty. I just found it absolutely fascinating.
Do maybe encourage people to join the Scottish Currency Facebook group. Necessarily causes inflation. I think inflation is actually quite difficult.
There you are, folks. That's what you need to do.
Japanese
after this is
Japanese government,
go to the website.
They've been trying to get inflation going for the last 30 years, ever since their crash in 1990.
Tim,
and they failed completely.
This is very important.
They've run the Japanese national debt up to nearly 300% of GDP.
Many of you have done.
And they're still struggling to avoid deflation. What you need to get inflation off the ground is usually something like a war or an external shock. And just got enough time to say that. I think
that's what we're doing.
The UK could actually be setting up exactly the perfect conditions for an inflationary shock in 2021. Because
take care.
What are we doing? We're aiming for a no-deal Brexit with 7,000 lorries parked in Kent, all trade through Dover coming to a halt. Empty shelves in the supermarket. At that time of year, I believe 70% of our food is imported because it's the middle of winter and nothing's growing. Meanwhile, there was a leak from the Treasury 2 weeks ago, I think, which basically suggested that Michael Gove is hatching a cunning plan with the Chancellor to demonstrate to the people in England, mostly, that Brexit is a fantastic success by increasing the government's handouts. So, for example, one of the things they were going to do was provide monetary compensation to any company which said it had lost money as a result of Brexit. So Jaguar, Land Rover, Nissan, whatever. But they also want to demonstrate that the man in the street is getting his 350 million a week back from Brussels. And they've now discovered that the Bank of England can create all this money for them and that there's no limits. So they're going to start handing it out. So now you've got a situation where, due to the coronavirus, we've lost 20% of the GDP. We could now, according to Goldman Sachs, do the same again with a hard Brexit. So you've just shrunk the economy's productive capacity by maybe 30%, combined with the government creating lots of extra money. That's how you start hyperinflation. It's the same as Robert Mugabe destroying the commercial agriculture system in Zimbabwe and then handing all wads of banknotes to all his supporters.
That's scary. Tim, that is scary.
I don't think the people in London have any idea of the dangers that they're playing with. I can remember things like the Toxteth riots and Brixton and things like that. And if you end up with, say, 15% unemployment because furloughs ended and the hospitality sector's all gone bust and so forth, then combine that with an empty shelf in the supermarket and no bog roll, and what's going to happen?
Rioting in the streets, perhaps.
My business partner has just bought a new BMW motorbike, and the BMW dealer says just as well you're buying it now because the price is going up 15% on the 1st of January.
Oh, really? As a result of Brexit?
Yes. That's because of the import tariff on motorcycles.
Well, there you are, folks. If you want to buy something from abroad, now's the time to do it. You don't want to leave it for much longer. So while you're out there buying your bog rolls, have a thought that you might want to buy something else that comes from overseas. Because I think bog rolls are made overseas, aren't they?
Well, they're not, but the pulp is imported.
Oh, what's imported?
The paper.
Oh, the paper's imported. Okay. So the rolls are made here, but the paper has to come from elsewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, it mostly comes from Sweden, I think.
Oh, Sweden. Okay. Oh, gracious. Things are getting crazier and crazier.
You can always recycle the Daily Mail or something and use that instead.
Okay, great one. Excellent news. Here's somebody on Periscope saying, this is really interesting. What do you think of a job guarantee?
Well, I think that would be a sensible way to go. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about universal basic income, but I'm not really in favour of a universal basic income. I think the job guarantee is a better way to go. The universal basic income is very expensive because everyone gets it. Even Warren Buffett would be getting the universal basic income. And I think, to my mind, I can't see any reason with a universal basic income why it doesn't just end up as a subsidy to employers. If I run the map company, if I was going to employ somebody and I knew they were getting $5,000 a year from the state, why would I not just take that off the wage I'm offering?
Yeah.
If I offer $20,000 now, suddenly my employee is getting $5,000 from the government, then next employee I can say, right, we're only getting $15,000 because the government's giving you the other $5,000.
Yeah.
You could say, well, we're going to pass legislation to prevent it, but over time it will happen because they just won't put the wages up or whatever. And because it's paid to everyone, the universal basic income is going to be at a very low level. So it's not really going to provide a decent living for anyone. It'll be a sort of maybe a little bit better than universal credit, but not much. So I think if we target the money onto those who actually want a job but can't get one, which is what the job guarantee does. And the job guarantee basically provides state funding to the council, voluntary organisations, community groups, whatever. If you want to, I don't know, put all the iron railings back in S-Bank that were chopped out in 1940 for the war effort, you could say we're going to set up a community scheme to train some welders and whatever to do the railings, and we'll get funding from the state to employ that person under the job guarantee, and they set to work, or visiting people in care homes, picking up litter, clearing exotic vegetation, all the sort of things that need done, but which the market is never going to do. The big thing about the job guarantee is it would pay, say, a living wage, £10 an hour, something like that. So you'd still have basic welfare for those who, for one reason or another, couldn't or wouldn't work. So it's not workfare. You're not forced to take a job guarantee post. It would provide training, and it's true for, I think, pretty much all employers. It's much easier to get a job if you're in a job. As soon as you're unemployed, the employer thinks, hang on a minute, there must be something wrong. Why are they unemployed? Were they disruptive or incompetent or whatever?
It sounds very much to my uneconomic ears a bit like FDR's New Deal.
Yeah, I think it probably is. He set up schemes all over the place, the Tennessee Valley schemes and all of that sort of thing to get people back to work. And again, another thing with the universal basic income that I don't like is it's a bit defeatist. It says, well, we can't really do anything about the job, so we'll just give you some money and sit at home and watch the TV. People don't want to do that. They want, most people don't work because they just want money. They want to meet people in the office. They want to, a lot of people find their partner through meeting somebody at work. It gives you a status, something to do. The UBI fails on all of those, but it doesn't do anything for you. You're just left at home watching, daytime TV.
We're coming close to the end of the time that we've got. Well, we're almost out of time. Thank you very much for that. It's good of you to give up the time. I just found it absolutely fascinating.
Do maybe encourage people to join the Scottish Currency Facebook group, or perhaps visit the reservebank.scot website.
There you are, folks. That's what you need to do. Right after this is gone, go to the website and learn more about what Tim and his colleagues are doing. I think you'll find it very interesting. Tim, thanks very much. This is very important. Support Indie Live. Write in and tell them if you like the show. Many of you have done, but Indie Live has loads of offerings right across the board every day of the week. Support Indie Live because, as they say, don't just criticize the media, become the media. That's what we're doing on the TNT show. Thank you again for joining us. And remember, it's been a great day for democracy. Take care. Look after yourselves. Stay safe. Good night, all.